Well, it was revealed this week that free speech is now a thing of the past in 90% of British universities, because the current generation of students, Generation Snowflake, as it's become known, is so intellectually fragile that many of them can't hear an opposing argument without dissolving in a puddle of traumatized feelings, and they need to take refuge in what they call safe spaces, places they say are designed to promote inclusiveness by, you've guessed it, excluding people. Specifically anyone with an unwelcome opinion, which may have a toxic effect on the vulnerable occupants of these safe spaces and trigger them by reminding them of things that have happened in the past that make them sad. In other words, these are people who've been intellectually disenfranchised by their own heightened sense of specialness, but I'm sure it's nothing a good slap around the face with a wet fish couldn't cure. Now, of course, stupidity is often self-indulgent, and herein lies a clue as to why this is happening. It's no accident that much of this poor me activism has coincided with universities dumbing down because dumbing down is good for business. The more they can offer useless vanity degree courses to people who don't belong anywhere near a university, the more money they make. Especially agenda-driven social justice courses that leave you dumber than you were before you started them, and that naturally attract the kind of people who are not there to broaden their knowledge, but to have some imagined victim status validated and reinforced. People who've been persuaded that their pathetic personal hang-ups have academic value and who are stupid and vain enough to actually believe it. People who didn't have the grades for the University of Life and who are too inadequate or dull to study something real like science or medicine or engineering, so they settle for a degree in gender studies or cultural studies or social justice and peace studies or some other load of wanky, subjective, bollock-brained nonsense that adds nothing at all to the body of human knowledge. Education as masturbation. Now there's a subject for a PhD. In the past, when I've talked about the problems at university, I've been told that I have no right to an opinion on the subject because I didn't go to university, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, I didn't need to become a priest either to know that religion is bollocks and gender studies is uber bollocks. Besides, I do have a master's degree in equality and fairness studies. You didn't know about that, did you? And a PhD in cultural histrionics from the University of Diversity, Cloud Cuckoo Land campus. It's entirely imaginary, of course, but it's still worth more than a Mickey Mouse degree in gender studies. So if you're doing a gender studies degree, you might want to save your blushes now and step up to something a bit more useful, like puppetry perhaps, or basket weaving. Give yourself a chance in life. A degree in gender studies will make you even more unemployable than you would be with no degree at all, because it tells a potential employer that you are likelier than not to be an agenda-driven troublemaker at heart who has spent years cocooned in a self-induced bubble of phony victimhood, immersed in a subject you knew in advance was going to be useless. Thank you for your interest. We'll let you know. Of course, there's always academia, and it says nothing good about academia that that's the only place your poxy degree is likely to carry any weight. So maybe you'll become a university lecturer and help to miseducate another generation of entitlement junkies and feelings jockeys to believe that they somehow deserve to be compensated for their useless, pampered existence, or maybe you'll get a job in a bar. Who knows? When you fill a university with social justice warriors who know nothing about life, yet who feel inclined to impose an agenda on everyone else, they will naturally gravitate towards running the student union, because then they can decide who gets to speak and who gets no platformed and shouted down. And that's why whenever a student union makes a public fool of itself with some crass act of censorship, its public face is often some strident faux feminist man-hater and or ethnic minority racist with a raft of imaginary grievances and a massive chip on their shoulder. I'd be curious to know how many of the people who run student unions are studying, say, chemistry or mathematics, and how many are enrolled in agenda-driven bullshit studies. It might be relevant. Anyway, now that the morons are actually in the universities dragging everyone down to their level, we need to do something about this safe space nonsense, because the fertility of our culture depends on universities germinating ideas, not exterminating them, and this generation of self-absorbed crybabies has no right to come along and salt the earth for everyone. Now, to those of us outside university in the common sense world, the answer here is pretty obvious. What's needed are a few robust safe space invasions, preferably by drunken rugby teams mooning at everyone and laying about them with wet fish, or socks full of cold rice pudding, whichever happens to be handy, saying the unsayable from the childish to the offensive until everyone there is all triggered up and vulnerable, traumatised to within an inch of their privilege, bombarded with gender-specific pronouns and buried under an avalanche of microaggressions until they dissolve in a slurry of liquidised feelings and boo-hoo poor me's. That would be the ideal scenario. However, more realistically, given that many universities now feel the need to offer remedial literacy and numeracy courses to first-year students emerging from what passes for an education system, it might be useful also if, before they officially commenced their studies, all students were required to get in touch with their inner child and give it a good clip round the ear. It would save an awful lot of trouble later on, not to mention considerable personal embarrassment when they finally grow up.